Hey, how's it going? This is BPA 7104. Going to do a tune-up and swap out an ABS pump in a 2013 Lincoln MKX. It's got a 3.7 liter V6. The tune-up looked like it was going to turn out to be a humongous pain in the butt, but it doesn't look like it's going to be that bad after all. Here's the rig, and I put some of the parts back just so you can see what needs to come off. It turns out it's not going to be that big of a pain in the butt after all. Okay, this is the Lincoln engine cover. It's foam, which kind of surprised me. Okay, then I took off the air box and the intake silencer. The battery has to come out, by the way. Now, there might be a faster way to do this, but I'm here on a weekend tuning this up for my pop, so I pulled the battery out. Plus, I'm going to need to pull the battery out because the ABS pump is way back down in there, but I'm going to try and make a combination video here. Anyway, the air box comes off. And then it's got another foam, I guess like a foam heat shield. And as you can see, man, there's not too much room back here. But it's just got a little, it's got one little mount, plastic body pin thing. Man, I'm running out of words here. I'm trying to hold the... But it mounts right under there. Anyway, so it's just this one body mount comes right off. Get that out of the way. And then the intake manifold, the top portion of the intake manifold is held on with 7 bolts, 7 mounting bolts across the front there. 2, 4, 6 there. They all stay in the manifold. The only one that comes out has got one up here on top. Another reason I'm making this video is it's my understanding that the Ford Edge with the 3.7 is exactly the same way. I mean, you don't have the fancy foam engine cover, but everything else is pretty much the same to my understanding. If I'm mistaken, guys, I'm a weekend warrior. I'm definitely not a mechanic. So once you loosen up the 7 bolts on the intake manifold, to get all these attachments, all these different harnesses are attached, and you got a coolant line coming across over here. Coolant line that came down. Oh, you can see it spilling a little coolant there. Oh man. And that's about my luck. Wasn't leaking any coolant until, of course, I started filming, and now, but I did, man. I just, there's no pressure, so I just got a rubber glove, put a wire tie around it. But anyway, you got to loosen up the evap line. You've got brake vacuum line back here. These harnesses for the CPU or ECU. Took these off as well. Clean these up. I think I'm probably gonna have to take these off. They come off with these little tabs here, and they pop right off, just like that. So then I can get this out of the way. Move this out of the way. Once you loosen up those, brake. Once you loosen up these 7 bolts, the whole intake's pretty loose. So I'm gonna go ahead, because I'm here by myself, so I'm gonna go ahead and set the camera down, see if I can fish this thing out of there. I know, looking at the master cylinder videos for these vehicles, for the Edge and the MKX, you have to take off the entire cowl, the wiper motors, the wipers, and then the bottom panel of the cowl as well, to get clearance back there to the master cylinder. So I am hoping that I'm going to be able to get this intake manifold off without having to do that. So let's see how it goes. Okay, what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to put some rags covering up the intake ports. 'Cause I don't want to be dropping anything. I don't want too much dust to be getting in there. Pretty good. Sweet. Okay, looks like we got a vacuum line in the back. And of course the compressor kicked on as soon as I wanted to show where that hose is. It's back there. So, I'm gonna get some pliers, but you know, there's actually enough room to reach around there and pull that hose out of there. Like that. There it is. All right. Trying to charge my camera at the same time here. But now with that top half of the intake manifold off, you can see clearance to the front 3 spark plugs is a piece of cake. The coils sit on top. It's the rear 3 that were, well, you're not going to be able to get to them unless you take off that intake manifold, but just want everybody to know it actually is not that bad of a job. Wasn't too bad. One thing I recommend, just throwing some tips out there for the other shade tree mechanics, get yourself a good supply of bungee cords and wire ties to plug up lines and things like that, especially if you're working, especially if you called that buddy that always tells you to call and he was busy today. Yeah, so you're going to be doing it on your own. Nevertheless, there are the 3 rear and the 3 plugs in the front. The rest of the tune-up is pretty straightforward. I might film a little bit of it, but it's pretty straightforward. Wow, that's gonna be the second part of the video. And you know what? I might just leave this intake manifold off to give me some more clearance to that ABS pump. Yeah, that's gonna be way in there, but it's going to require me to take off the battery box and the air filter box. So right now I'm going to go ahead and tune up the rig, change out the spark plugs. I've got a new air filter for it as well. So always make sure you cover up the intake manifold. It fits actually very nicely. It's just 2 rags that I got over the top of it because you sure don't want anything falling in there. And no, there's no gasket. The gasket's got to be on the top half of the intake, I guess. Nevertheless, I'm going to start taking off the coils and putting in the new plugs.
JoJo, who's at the Home and Garden Show in McAllen. It's happening all weekend long, so stick around, hang tight. Until then, it's Lee Bryce with the Rumor on KTX.
Girl, you know I've known you forever. How many nights we hung out together?
Just hard.
Same little crowd, little bar, little town, round this old dance floor. My boys are laughing, tap me on the shoulder, making a motion like a jogging any closer. They wanna know what's up, why I'm still holding you, even when the song is over. There's a rumor going round about me and you, stirring up our little town from last week too.
Okay. All the coils are the same part number, but nevertheless, just for the sake of being, you know, thorough, I will just make sure you put things back in the order that you took them off. One thing I wanted to point out, did a tune-up on a Sentra the other day, and the spark plugs were 14 millimeter. I don't know where that came from, but these are standard 5/8 or the small spark plug socket. Just throwing this out there for newbies and teenagers and stuff that are going to start, you know, messing around with the automotive repair. Always use a spark plug socket. It's got that little rubber grommet on the inside to protect the ceramic top of the spark plug. Don't just use the standard socket, okay? They're cheap. They're, I don't know, $2.50, $4 maybe, but use the right socket when you're going to be changing out spark plugs. I always break them free by hand, and then I'll finish them off with the Milwaukee Impact. Probably should have used a bigger ratchet for these. This rig's got about 87,000 miles on it, so it's never had the spark plugs changed out. And I'm using a wobble socket, a wobble extension, excuse me, just to give it a little bit of play. But it's holding on to it. I'm not going to just torque it over like that. And then I'll just finish them off with the Milwaukee. You can do it by hand, it doesn't matter. See, that grommet protects and holds on to the spark plug. It also makes it a lot easier when you're going to install them. Piece of cake. Now when I put them back in, I'm going to put them all in by hand. These are iridium plugs, so they're already pre-gapped. There's no reason to gap them. Do they still gap plugs nowadays? I don't know. And again, this is the beauty of using the proper spark plug socket. See, it holds on to it. I always do it by hand. I recommend everybody do it by hand. And one thing I am forgetting. Gentlemen at the auto parts store recommend that I use anti-seize on it, but I'll tell you what, I'm going to take a 10-minute break. I'm here at my workshop. I own our trucking company has a garage, so that's why I've got the space available. But I'm gonna go inside and do some research to see if it's recommended to put anti-seize. Anti-seize is not always recommended on all plugs, so I'm gonna go check that real quick. Okay, it is recommended that you put a little bit of anti-seize, some kind of thread lubricant on the spark plugs before you put them back in. So you're talking just a little tiny bit, just enough to coat the threads. That's about it. You don't need a big glop on there, just enough so the threads will be lubricated and it'll come off easy on your next tune-up. And again, I'm going to start them all by hand. You got to be careful when you drop it down the passageway. Make sure that you're not hitting that terminal because they're pre-gapped. So from there, you just turn it. It's a lot easier when you put that lubricant on there. And once you get it started, you can probably finish it off with an electric ratchet if you want. Got to be careful. Got to wiggle it just right. Sometimes you get a brand new socket. That rubber boot grabs on just a little too well. Like this one's doing now, of course. And this is what I'm looking for. But you use the spark plug socket a few times, it'll loosen up. Hope the video doesn't get banned because of the music. I don't know if you can hear it or not. And again, just a little bit, just enough to smear around the threads. That's it. That's actually a little too much. I'm gonna take some off of that. Shouldn't be sticking out. Just like that. Yeah, all these are gonna get stuck. Harbor Freight. And then just torque it by hand. Not too tight. There are official torque specs. And if you're just starting, I recommend you find out what they are. Probably somewhere between. But always check. So I know that might be incorrect, so always check. But those of us who've done a lot of tune-ups over the years, you know just more or less how tight to make it. Okay, that's the front half. I'm gonna put the coils back. Always gonna clean the boots off put a little lubrication under here. It's a little bit of grease. Make sure it stays sealed. One thing I did forget, and I'm gonna do it on the rear side, always have a supply of air. Should have blown out these passages. Even though they're the boots, as you can see here, the boot seals the spark plug port. You still want to, you never know, just get any dust or any little pieces of dirt or anything you might have in there. Okay, I'm gonna go find some grease. Just put a real thin coating here on the bottom of the boot. Just enough so it'll seal properly. Real quick note, as you're putting the coils back on, they only line up one way, guys, so always make sure, again, you put 1, 2, and 3 back, 4, 5, and 6. And that might be backwards. Might be, you know, I'm not sure how the cylinders are numbered in these engines. They're different for different engines. But nevertheless, just make sure you put the coils back where they go. And you can see the hold-down bolt there. It's going to tell you how to line it up right. So we're going to go ahead and do the back 3. It's going to be the same thing as the front. And then I think I'm going to attack that ABS module now that I've got all this clearance. So I'm going to end up splitting this video, I think. One more thing. Always remember when you're putting the coil harnesses back on, you should hear it click. Did you hear that? You should have heard it. I'm sure you can't, even though the music might be a little bit loud. But just push it in until it clicks. Just like that. Then you lock the red tab down. Lock them all down. This one I already locked down, but I heard it click, so I wanted to point that out. And the rear is the same way. One more note on the tune-up. The hold down bolts for the coils are 8mm. All of the bolts for the intake manifold, all the bolts for the intake manifold are also 8mm. Good Lord. Okay. And a problem. Okay, and taking off these red tabs, you got to be careful. As you can see there where the little locking portion pops out there. Oh my goodness. Focus. Okay. What happens when the little red tab breaks off? Like this. Well, no need to panic. Get yourself a little pick tool or something like that, and you can work it in there and slide it out, just like that. Okay, so I am going to put it back and lock it back down to make sure that that the locking tab actually stays locked. But just take note of that. Not everything goes as planned. That's why you have to bring as many tools as you can. If you're going to do it on a remote site, bring little micro tools. I've got a little micro tool set that I've got, a bunch of these picks, and I bring all these little picks. I just busted them out of my little bag right now. Just for, you never know when something like this is going to happen. So instead of getting stuck here and, oh man, what am I going to do now? That little tab right there. Anyway, just wanted to point out one of the problems. Sometimes you'll run into them. Always be prepared. Okay, just remembered another little tip. And it occurred to me after I mentioned, oh yeah, get the shorter needle nose pliers just in case that spark plug socket gets stuck. And I remembered, all I did was I got a little bit of grease, and you put it on the, get a little bit of grease, put it on the ceramic portion of the spark plug. You don't do that with every spark plug. What I did was I put a little bit of grease there, and then I worked it in to the rubber boot of the spark plug socket. Okay, and that's just a little bit. And then spark plug socket comes off very easily. I've already put the 3 spark plugs in, and set I seated them with the Milwaukee, but I'm gonna torque them by hand. Just like that. Just a little bit of grease on the ceramic portion. Work it in there a little bit. Doesn't make them loose, but just loose enough, not loose enough to where they'll fall, but loose enough so that they'll come right off. Okay guys, just another quick tip. You're going to be removing a lot of wiring harnesses, and there's a coolant line over here, vent line that you're going to disconnect. This I did connect already because I just started leaking fluid for some reason. It wasn't at first, but anyway, don't panic. You know, when you're taking stuff off and you're tying stuff down, get yourself a bunch of bungee cords. There's another tip. It'll hold a lot of stuff out of the way, because when you're trying to get deep in those recesses, look at this thing. I mean, a lot of this thing too. The evap line, they're just going to be in the way, and of course, you know, you're always going to be rubbing right up against these little sharp edges and stuff. Just grin and bear it, folks. You want to work on your own car, that's what it takes. Nevertheless, once you're finished up and you start releasing your harnesses and whatnot, you know, to their natural, they'll tend to go back to their natural positions. So you'll see that, you know, you're going to have you know, holders and stuff, grommets to pop back in. You can see there, you'll see that it's going to fit right in there, you know, up here like this. Pretty much everything is going to go right back. You know, your it's the accelerator position, throttle position motor. You know, everything's going to go back pretty much the way it goes. You know, and then just make sure you button everything back up. That's the one thing you got to make sure of. Now, on the torque specs for this 3.7 liter, it's always good to have access to the internet. The internet is a wonderful thing. So the torque sequence, let me turn the light there. That's the torque sequence right there, okay? And that's a screenshot taken on my phone. Found it on the internet. The torque spec is 89 inch-pounds plus 45 degrees. So you can see I got all the bolts already down. They're just snug down, and then I'm going to start torquing them in that sequence. It's going to be 89 inch-pounds plus 45 degrees more. How much is 45 degrees? Half of a quarter turn. Anyway, that's another thing, by the way, another tool tip. You will need an inch-pound torque wrench. It's another reason why you have to go out and get more tools. All right, getting ready to hopefully finish it up here. All right, gonna throw a quick tip in there for the beginners. I know it's been addressed in a couple other videos about, you know, it's this is going to be 89 inch-pounds, torquing down the upper intake bolts, 89 inch-pounds plus 45 degrees. Okay, how much is 45 degrees? Well, 90 degrees is going to be, let's just say it's 6 o'clock. Okay, 90 degrees is going to be from 6 to 9 o'clock, or from 3 to 6 o'clock. All right, so 45 degrees is going to be half that. So say 6 o'clock to about 7:30. All right, got a good tip for a Fomaco mechanic is to put a little mark there. Put a mark. Let's say that mark's at 6 o'clock. So I know when that mark gets to about 7:30. Again, when it gets to about 7:30, about right there is where it's going to be. Quick note also, when you're torquing down these bolts, this harness here is a little bit tight, so make sure you're moving that harness out of the way when you're torquing down, otherwise you're going to get some friction here and it's going to give you a false reading. But, so again, that's about 6 o'clock, so you're going to come over to about 7:30, maybe a little more than that. I'm doing it with one hand, so. But there you go. From a top view, that's probably what it's going to look like, more or less. And you can double check your mark. See? Mark moved about 45 degrees. I did it with this one just for demonstration purposes, but for anybody else who's familiar with it, well, you just go 45 degrees.